time for the Severe MMA preview show with Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and your host, Ian O'Neill.
That's right, everybody. It's me, Ian O'Neill, and we are here for the UFC 276 preview show. And as always, I'm joined by my three brothers, Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, and Harry Powell, who will be with us momentarily, experiencing some sound issues. Is Harry, and speak of the devil, here he comes. Harry, give us a hello. This is the moment we've all been waiting for.
Hello.
Oh, you sound beautiful. If we can keep it like that, we'll be
change anything.
Yeah. Before we get going on to this fantastic card, let me remind you guys of our sponsors, All Real Nutrition Bars. Head on over to eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA, and get yourself 15% off those delicious bars. Anybody who's watching along live with us today can leave a comment, leave a question. We will get to them momentarily. We have a fantastic card ahead of us this Saturday night in Las Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. Sean Sheehan is shaking himself down. We're all busting at the seams to talk about this card from top to bottom, stacked. And at the very top, we have two title fights: Isreal Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, Sean Strickland and Alex Pereira, Robbie Lawler, Barberena, Pedro Munhoz, Sean O'Malley, all on the main card. Ireland's Ian Garry fighting on the prelims, and a bunch of other fights that we're going to tuck into right now. Guys, let's start with the main event: Isreal Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. And after doing a lap around the middleweight division twice on some occasions, don't be distracting me with that flag now,
I
Sean.
just saw it. I just saw what you were wearing and I had to do it. It's your own fault.
I know. So Isreal Adesanya doing a lap, beating guys once, beating guys twice. He has a new challenger in front of him on Saturday night. That is Jared Cannonier. Some fresh blood, a chance for Cannonier to come in and upset the odds against the dominant champion in Isreal Adesanya. And for me, I think it could be a case where we're all going to sit here for the next couple of minutes and try and convince ourselves how Jared Cannonier is going to get this done, because there's not much that I have seen from Cannonier to make me super convinced that he can get the job done in this main event on Saturday night. Now, I am not beyond the thoughts that he might get it done. There are ways that he could get it done. Jan Blachowicz was the person who laid out the blueprint to beat Isreal Adesanya. We've seen that when Isreal moved up to challenge for the light heavyweight title. No one has been able to do that since to him. People have tried. Whitaker has tried. Vettori has tried, but they have failed. And now it's Jared Cannonier's turn. For me, Jared Cannonier, a uniquely fantastic individual in the way he talks, the way he fights. The guy moved down from the heavyweight division, made his debut in 2015, I believe, against Sean Jordan, I believe, in the heavyweight division. Brief spell at light heavyweight, found his way at the middleweight division, is 5-1 with an only defeat in the middleweight division to Robert Whitaker. He comes in to challenge the champion here. Let's get into it, guys. Spencer, I'm going to go to you first. You spoke and had an excellent article with Jared Cannonier, which came out yesterday. And you've, in general, been doing tremendous work this week on this card, speaking to the majority of the competitors on the card. Talk to me about Jared Cannonier. I think we're both along the same lines, and we both think he's a fascinating individual. Always interesting to hear what he has to say. And to me, I think the biggest thing that he will need to rely on in this fight with Isreal Adesanya is that mentality that he brings to the table, is that mindset that he brings to the table. Because, okay, Adesanya is a very skillful fighter, but he also brings a strong, heavy mental game into his fights as well. And sometimes that can wilt fighters. We've seen that with the likes of Vettori and especially with Paulo Costa. Do you feel that, him and his strong mentality is going to pay him some dividends in this main event on Saturday night?
I think so. I mean, the main takeaway for me from talking to him on Tuesday was just that he really is. And look, it's a thing everybody says, right? Is, oh, I'm just taking this. This is just another fight. Jared Cannonier is one of the few people that when he says it, there's a conviction to him, and he's not trying to convince you or himself. He really is looking at this as just any other fight. Now, he made clear that he has the utmost respect for Izzy. He enjoys watching him as a fan, as someone that's in the sport, as a contemporary. He has a great deal of appreciation for everything that Izzy has done and does when he's in there. But when he's standing across from him, he's just a guy that's trying to separate him from his consciousness and stand in the way of him having success. And I think that approach and that kind of separating the two things is really important, because we have seen Marvin Vettori go in there and get kind of worked up and not be able to stay focused. We've seen Paulo Costa go in there and get worked up and not stay focused. Robert Whittaker, in the lead to the first fight, admitted, look, they wanted us to do some trash talk and it became a thing. It kind of threw me off. Izzy's great at making guys pay for being just even that little bit unfocused. I think it also helps a little bit that the aura of invincibility is gone with Isreal Adesanya. He's no longer undefeated. We've seen him lose. It wasn't a, well, he just got caught situation. It was somebody went out there and stood at range with him and traded with him, beat him on the feet, and then out wrestled him. And I think that for a guy like Cannonier, that is coming down from heavyweight, that has been in there with Jan Blachowicz, that has been in there with championship level talent at light heavyweight and looked good at middleweight, is another piece of that where he goes, okay, I've seen him be beat. I've seen him be beaten by guys that I've been in there with, that I've felt. Let me see what I can do. And I mean, we're going to get into it, and Harry did a great job on the one-man booth breaking down this fight specifically. There are ways, like there's a way. It may be, percentage wise, I don't know, but there's a path here, and I'm really interested. I think this is going to be a more competitive fight than a lot of people think.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that too myself, although my pick was Israel by decision. And I mean, it's been a kind of a shift in the tone of what Izzy has been saying ahead of this fight, Sean. I mean, he's not talking as much shit. He's saying he wants to come out there and he wants to put on a performance. He's not really that bad mouthing Jared Cannonier. He says he respected him. He wanted him to win a couple of fights so that he could give him this opportunity. And for Isreal Adesanya, this is a kind of a big moment too, where he can kind of go out there. He's in the main card, in the main event of a UFC International Fight Week after signing a brand new deal. He's a superstar of the UFC right now, whether we want to believe it or not, but he's not being put into this slot for the sake of it. But it's up to him to go in there and put on a show. I don't think he's going to want to go all the way with Jared Cannonier, and I'm curious to see what you think and if he will go all the way with him.
That's a funny way of phrasing it, but
sorry. I said it, I was like,
you said it twice as well, in other words. I think my pick, I think I said it for Adesanya to win inside the distance, but you hit on a lot of interesting points there. I was interested to hear you talking about the trash talk back and forth. Honestly, I haven't heard one single word of it. That's not something I ever consumed, to be honest, but it's interesting that he hasn't been, considering maybe Cannonier is one of the guys you might be able to get to if you did that. But I think Spencer hit the nail on the head there in terms of kind of breaking down the Blachowicz matchup in a wide sense. Like, someone has shown that they can beat him, but you have to have like Liam Neeson has, a very specific set of skills to actually beat him. And I don't think Jared Cannonier has that, to be honest. So, in a very short way of saying it, I just can't see it. I really can't. Now, there's two ways I think Jared Cannonier can win this fight, right? The first way is a big punch and knock him out, right? Just throw big punches, throw it the 5 rounds. Hopefully one lands and you knock him out. The other way is to just spam him with leg kicks and do nothing else. Just kick the leg, kick the leg, kick the leg, kick the leg, kick the leg. Because the biggest problem for Cannonier, and the best thing that Adesanya does in lots of his fights, is he makes guys freeze in front of him because of those jabs that he throws and because of the feints and everything. He makes guys freeze. And I went back and I watched the Anderson Silva Jared Cannonier fight, and Anderson Silva did that at times to Cannonier. Now, the problem with Anderson Silva is he, at that stage of his career anyway, didn't have the same array of strikes and non-strikes, if you want to put it that way, in terms of the fakes that Adesanya has now. And his ability to fight off the cage, his ability to, take a stutter step, go left, then go right and get away and circle out, is just not there the same way Adesanya is. So to beat that to beat that wholly, in terms of like how Jan Blachowicz did it to him, you have to be able to not bite on those feints. You have to be able to not throw counters when he throws things out there so he can counter you. You need to have good wrestling. You need to have very good technical striking, that when you do throw, you know that what's coming back from him is not going to affect you as much as your strikes are affecting him, or that you can just block them altogether. Does Cannonier have that technical striking and wrestling skill set? I would say absolutely not. No, I've never seen it in any of his fights. He's good at certain things. When I say he froze against Anderson Silva, he did some good things to cut off the cage against Anderson Silva, and he hit him with big, hard shots. But I think that's a lot more agricultural than you're going to need to be to beat someone like Isreal Adesanya. But I do think if he is very open with himself and very honest with himself in preparations, and his team are, and he kind of realizes, I'm not going to go in there into a technical battle with Isreal Adesanya. I'm just going to kick that leg. That's a way for him to win the fight. But you rarely see fighters actually like that. But
he actually said that yesterday on the ahead of the fight at the media day. He says he does realize he can't go in there and go for a tit for tat battle with Isreal Adesanya, and I think we could all say that it's not the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you do that with Adesanya, it's funny because I can't wait till we talk about Max Holloway and Volkanovski. And also, I'll forget about the technical things, because Harry, I know, is going to talk a lot about that, right? You said, he's a big star, and he is, and I think they actually have done a great job of promoting Izzy, and he's done a great job of promoting himself. But I think Max Holloway is as big, if not bigger, of a star than Izzy, and this is a better fight with a built-in kind of rivalry between the two of them. I can't believe it's not main event. Volkanovski versus Holloway absolutely should be main event. Now, I might be nitpicking there a little bit. It's a great card, but I just feel like this would be so much of a better card if it's a really good main event, Adesanya versus Cannonier, our co-main event, sorry. But what about the main event, Volkanovski versus Holloway? And even when we were talking here, you said, let's talk about the main event, and I kind of half forgot. And you started talking about Adesanya. I was like, oh yeah, they have, without a shadow of a doubt, they have that backwards. But either way, I'm looking forward to both the fights, and I'm sure Harry has a big technical breakdown of this fight as well. More even than One Man Boot, which everyone says.
Okay, I'll try not to bring him in a sexual manner as well. Sorry about that.
Try to bring him in a sexual manner.
Harry, you
will go all the way if you ask me to.
Yeah, you will. Thank you. But look at coming into this fight, you did an excellent job on the One Man Brute, and if anyone hasn't checked it out, definitely do go and check it out. Where you just went in depth into this fight. Jared Cannonier, to kind of allude to what Sean said, was he's not the biggest bark, but he does have the biggest bite. That's what he's going to have to do here. He's going to have to pick and choose his moments carefully in this fight. Like we said, not getting a tit for tat battle with Isreal Adesanya. And he's also going to have to get off the impactful shots. We've seen fighters do that time and time again in the UFC. And recently, with all the judging talk, is that they have been getting in there. And, Marlon Vera versus Rob Font is an example where Rob Font landed an abundance of strikes, but Marlon Vera landed the most impactful ones. And I feel that, Harry, that is the best route to victory here for Jared Cannonier.
I agree. Hopefully my sound is okay, and hopefully it stays that way. I think Cannonier doesn't have the level of technical skill as the guys have already touched on, for him able to go toe-to-toe with Adesanya. But, I don't think he needs it. Something that we find, especially when I'm grappling, right? If you go and you grapple with a guy who's a day one grappler, oftentimes he can give you, or they can give you, more of a challenge because they don't know how to play the game. There's a perceived notion when you're striking and when you're grappling that there are a set of rules that you must adhere to, and there are expected reactions that you're supposed to give. If I'm Jared Cannonier and if I'm Isreal Adesanya, I can use those things to my advantage, right? Both because Cannonier may be expecting certain reactions at his level of the understanding of the game, and Izzy has a far greater understanding. And I expect that that's the way that this will go. But Jared Cannonier may react to some things that Isreal is just not expecting because he doesn't have the same level of technical understanding of the game. Right. And I think that's where, as Shawnee says, he can have lots of success. And he's either going to need to use the blitzing that he has to do the thing, go and do the hitting, right? Do the big hitting, do the big striking, or he needs to go in there and take away the leg.
Indeed.
Is my mic still okay? If
Yeah,
so,
it's
Yeah,
really
you're
good.
perfect. Yeah, keep
You
going.
just
sorry, I'm very nervous about it now.
We'll tell you. Don't
We'll
worry.
let you know,
We'll
we'll let you know.
interrupt you. We'll interrupt you.
In the one-man booth, I think there's a couple of things. I'm going to just touch on the. I'm going to touch on the trash talking. Throughout, I feel like there's a slight kinship between Izzy and Jared, right? And it's hard to put my finger on it, but I think it's because Jared comes in and he just fights this fight. He's doing it for the betterment of himself. He's not doing it as a vastly inflated ego persona, right? And I think Isreal is somebody that's quite introspective and respects and appreciates that sort of approach. You see the way he dealt with Costa and Vettori. I think there's half and half in that he's giving them some shit because he knows that he can get to them. But I also think he doesn't respect their view of fighting. Right. And I think that is a big thing here. Ian mentioned it earlier. Jared Cannonier had a couple of losses and Izzy was like, please, like, put some wins together so I can get you in here and we can do the thing. And I don't think that's a get in here so I can beat you easily. I think that's a you deserve the big payday. Let me usher you in here and we can do the fighting. Now, obviously, on Saturday night, there's not going to be a please have the belt, right? Have the money. I'm pretty confident that Izzy is going to be in as much of a dominant driving seat as he was against Acosta and in some aspects against Vettori. But that doesn't mean that Jared Cannonier can't use variety to win, right? Now, Shawnee said that just attack the leg. It's not going to be enough. And it's not going to be enough because watch what Robert Whittaker did. Robert Whittaker tried to attack the leg a number of times. Isreal made the read and kicked him in the fucking head. Yeah, I think if you show Isreal the same thing too often with the same setup, he's going to punish you and he's going to punish you really, really badly for it. Vettori, in the Costa fight, right? Izzy was faking jabs. Costa was moving his head to the side and was blocking, bringing his arm up in case of a right high kick. So Izzy went with the low kick. Costa brought his hands down. Next time, what did Izzy do? Throws a left high kick. He knows that Costa is going to move this side, glances up the top of the head, lands beautifully. Izzy is a guy that I mentioned him a bit like a tiramisu, right? There's layers to him. And the way that he goes in and fights is that he has a game plan going in and then he makes reads. And the reads are the first layer of the ice cream, right? Then he comes in based on the second round and he's amalgamated the reads and the game plan together. He is a fighter that changes round by round, which is why it's so hard to beat him. If I'm Vettori and I can push him against the cage and take him down, fine. But I think the first takedown was a mistake from Isreal Adesanya trying to knee him as Vettori was coming in. And the second one was a lack of focus because he'd been able to turn him off the cage so frequently. I can't see Jared Cannonier having similar success going back to the well with just a low kick. And I can't see Jared Cannonier having similar success trying to take him down. He has decent takedown success, but he lands 0.15 takedowns per 15 minutes, which goes to show you that he doesn't take people down very often and doesn't attempt to take people down, right? So I just feel like Cannonier has two routes to victory. One is lull Izzy into a false sense of security that this is just going to be a Isreal on the outside, pickpocketing, doing the thing. Jared is going to be like, I'm here with big shots if you're coming in, and then he needs to burst him. Or he needs to be taking away the leg, and then bursting him, or finding a way to draw Izzy into the pocket and firing there. Go on, Shawnee.
I was actually thinking during the week, and I'm watching a couple of the fights today. I actually didn't think of it, but now that you said it, could this be another fucking Yoel Romero 25-minute bore fest?
Yes,
and that's
really
what you have
could.
to do, I think. Unfortunately, I think that's what you have to do with someone like Izzy, who, like Izzy's ability to kind of make his opponents react with those feints, and also his ability to read how his opponents react as well, is something that I think is up there, the highest I've ever seen in the UFC.
This is why I picked Izzy by decision.
And you know, another thing as well, though, like that's from Izzy's point of view, and absolutely correct. But from a contender's point of view, right? When you get to a fight like that, and I went back and I watched the first Volkanovski Holloway fight, and it's what made it such a fucking brilliant performance that Volkanovski went in there and fought his own fight. It's very hard for a contender to go in there against someone as good as Adesanya, even though he's a little bit overrated, in my opinion, but still, someone, far superior to you in terms of lots of people's opinion, and not change things up wholly, and not be yourself, and not do what took you to the dance, whether it is those leg kicks. As Harry said there, Harry gave great reasons for not spamming leg kicks, right? But Jared Cannonier, in my opinion, needs to ignore those reasons and fucking do it anyway, because he's really good at doing it. To go in and land a big knockout blow, he's going to need to run through a few of them fucking feints. He's going to need to bite in those feints. He's going to need to take punches from Isreal Adesanya to get it. And if he looks at it, and if his team has looked at it and goes, right, you throw leg kicks, this will happen. You go in and attack, try to get the knockout, this will happen, and easily win in those areas, then he won't throw leg kicks, then he won't attack, then he'll stand there on the outside and be frozen. And Izzy has shown in the past, if someone freezes against him, he will freeze against him, basically, and think he's winning and do a full Rosenham Eunice, and Pat Barry will be jumping out saying he won 50-45 when it's probably a close 48-47 fight, because no one has landed fucking anything. Now, I'm actually not sure. You were talking about Jared Cannonier there. I don't know him that well as like a person or anything like that, or as a character. I'm not sure what his character is, and it's something we will, for me personally anyway, we'll see on Saturday night, but I don't know. It felt like he was frozen a little bit against Anderson Silva, but Harry, you might know better than me. Go on.
I'm going to jump back in with just a point on what Cannonier can do to get to Izzy, right? Izzy has the one thing, and it's a big thing, but the one thing that I don't like in the Isreal Adesanya game is the fadeaway lean, right? And this is where I think Cannonier, if he bursts him often and at the right moments, if he's done the research, right? If he's listened to the one-man booth, he'll win the fight, basically is what I'm saying, right? Like if he goes in there and he's able to catch Izzy as he's resetting his stance and burst him, Isreal will lean back. The moment he's leaning back, yes, it's the danger zone. No, it's not Top Gun. But yes, it's the danger zone because Izzy has good power there and he has good ability to land shots there. But this is where Jared can absolutely slam a leg kick in. That's where he can threaten wrestling if he wants to make it awkward. That's where he can come with the big overhand rights. I think the lean fadeaway is the way to catch Izzy. Now, getting him to do that is you're going to have to catch him squaring. You're going to have to catch him in between movements. But Vettori was able to do it. Romero was able to do it once or twice. Costa was able to do it, but wasn't able to capitalize. I think that fadeaway, obviously Whittaker, the fadeaway is the way to get him. At no point should a fighter's head and shoulders be that far behind his hips. It's not good, and it's not useful, and it doesn't pertain to good balance. And if Cannonier doesn't take advantage of that, Andre Muniz will take advantage of that.
It's all about balance.
Indeed it is, and let's balance it out to the co-main event, where Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway will throw down for the third time as Sean Sheehan rubs his hands together. We talk, and in particular Graham talks about jeopardy in fights. And to me, in this fight, the jeopardy is as high as any jeopardy could get in any fight. There's so much storylines that can come out of this fight. There's so many paths out of the road that we can take after this fight. We have Volkanovski looking to move up to the lightweight division. We have Max Holloway talking about the lightweight division. We have a whole featherweight division that is waiting with bated breath to see the winner of this fight, because if it is Max Holloway, they're going to go again, baby. And that's it. That means all the contenders in the featherweight division are going to have to wait a little longer, and it could stay going and going and going. So I think, in my opinion, for the benefit of the featherweight division, we have to be looking towards an Alexander Volkanovski win. That is not going to be handed to him. They had a razor close fight in the last, and the last two were razor close. A lot of people thought Max Holloway did enough to get the job done. And I'm going to go to you first, Sean Sheehan, because I know you're mad to come in here and talk about how this could be the main event and about Max Holloway and what a star he is. And, you know, he is a star, but are we hoping, for the sake of the featherweight division, that he doesn't get the job done here on Saturday night?
I don't know about that. That might be, you know, that might be a little bit harsh, I suppose. You know, it depends what, you know, it depends what happens. It depends what way he wins. It depends. I don't know. It depends what they both decide to do next after it. But
actually,
like,
I need to actually kind of bring you in a little bit better, because we do our picks for SevereMMA,
yes,
right? And your pick was in earlier in the week.
It was.
And to everybody's shock, just before they're going to get published today, Sean Sheehan comes in and he's been talking about, I don't know if you're storing a crystal ball there in the man cave in West Limerick right now, or what you looked at, or what kind of premonition that you got. But in Sean comes with a pick for Max Holloway to win via second round knockout. And do you know what? Forget about the fucking featherweight division. I want to hear why you picked that.
I went back and I watched both of their fights, and I went back and I watched the second fight, and Max Holloway beat the living shit out of him for 2 rounds. He landed so many big strikes. It was funny. I watched the second fight first, and then I watched the first fight after it, and he solved so many issues in the first fight. One big thing I will say, though, and it's going against my own opinion here, that second fight was in Fight Island, I believe. It was in the middle of the pandemic. They both looked not necessarily out of shape, because neither of them lads can look out of shape, but compared to, I'm sure, how they look on Saturday and compared to how they looked at the fight before it was just a very, very weird time. But having said that, right, I watched a shitload of fights today, lads, and I spent too much time watching fight. I went full fucking Harry Powell on it. You watch Max Holloway, right, and you watch the first fight against Volkanovski. You watched the Cater fight. I watched the Yair Rodriguez fight. All very different types of fighters. But you watched even back towards the fucking McGregor fight, but fights, Aldo fights, all of those. What does Max Holloway do, right? It's not necessarily that he comes forward. He like stands in your face and forces you to wilt. And there's no wilting in Alexander Volkanovski. There is fucking none, right? So Max Holloway has shown in his last couple of fights as well, especially the Yair Rodriguez fight and the first Volkanovski fight, that he's not the fastest fighter in the world. He's faster than most people, but there's at least 2 lads in that division that are faster than him. And when you fight in that pocket, it's about speed and it's about bravery and it's about skill. Yair Rodriguez was brave. He was fast, but I don't think in those sort of ways he's as skillful as Max Holloway. Volkanovski, faster, as smart, and as skillful, more skillful, in fact, in those areas. And all of this sounds like I'm going to be picking Volkanovski again. But then you go and watch the second fight, right? And Max Holloway doesn't fight the way he does in all of his other fights. He doesn't stand there in the pocket and force you to fight with him. He stands a little bit outside of the pocket, and he comes in with boom, 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 combinations. Stops. Boom, 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 combinations. And he lights up Volkanovski, absolutely lights him up, and forces him to change and forces him to fight a different way. And I think Max Holloway, through less volume, less shots, but more impactful shots in the second fight, if he ups that in the third fight, I think he'll knock him out. That's the reason I picked him. And I think that small change from Max Holloway, if the fight is very similar to the first fight, will get him a finish in the first 2 rounds, because he was that close to getting it. And I think a big thing I saw in Volkanovski, I'm very interested to see if Harry saw this as well. And I didn't see it in the first fight. I watched the second fight first. I saw it there, didn't see it in the first fight, and then I went and watched the Korean Zombie fight, and I saw it there too. That Alexander Volkanovski is, and I put out a tweet looking for a stat. He's a very one-handed fighter. He throws jab and jab and jab and jab and jab. But he defends one-handed as well. He defends with his right hand here, and then he pushes like across his face to defend with it like that. And when he does that, takes time. And you saw Max landing that uppercut all the while. You saw him landing the head kick at the end of the first round. And I think a lot of that is because Volkanovski is fighting with his left hand so much and the jab so much. And a lot of that comes down to the height and the size of Max Holloway. Now the reach, they say Volkanovski's a bigger reach, but it's a bit weird. Max is a bigger, taller, rangier guy. And it forces Volkanovski to fight that way. And when Max Holloway refused to fight him in the pocket, Volkanovski didn't fight his great game plan against bigger guys where he jabs them, where he can control them there and where he can be faster than them. But when Max Holloway took a step outside and hard steps inside, he might eat a jab, he might eat a few shots, but he's also landing those big, massive, hurtful blows right down through the middle. He's forcing Volkanovski to put that left hand out and defend with one hand. And when you're defending with one hand, you're open either here, here, or here. And Max Holloway is picking that position. He'll throw a left hook, he'll throw an uppercut, he'll throw a head kick, and he'll land one of them. And that was a big key in the start of that, or in the first two rounds of that fight. It kind of changed a little bit afterwards. What do you put it down to? I think Volkanovski changed. I think there was maybe cardio issues. I think the lack of a crowd and all that all played into it. But if the first two rounds play out in a similar way, I think Max Holloway gets him out of there.
Harry, what do you think of all of what Sean has said and your take on the fight, please?
Sean Sheen, you're taking everything I worked for, motherfucker.
Go on. I've been doing it for a long time now. I've been doing it.
Fucking lines. I don't know. So I had very similar reads, right? I just don't know how this is going to go, is the honest answer. What we saw, and the reason why I'm so excited for this, is because I could do all the analysis I want, and I just think that both guys are going to come with something different. I think over the 25 minutes, over the 50 minutes that they've spent together, both of them understand what's good about the person's game and what's bad about the person's game. And I think that what we're going to see, and this is why I think the first two rounds, I completely agree with Shawnee, are going to be the most interesting, is we're going to see whose game plan is going to win, right? Now, the thing that I'm so impressed with about both of these guys is their ability to make reads and change game plans during the fight. Alexander Volkanovski made some fantastic changes in that second fight because, as Shawnee said, he was getting smashed up in the first two rounds, right? He's going to have gone back and he's going to look at that fight and he's going to say, why in those first two rounds was I getting fucked up? If me and Sean can see that it's because Max was taking a slight step outside of range, coming in and landing big shots, then Alexander Volkanovski is going to be able to see those things. What does Volkanovski do to change that is where I'm very interested. In my opinion, I'd like to see Volkanovski fight on slightly more side-to-side lines rather than forward and backward. He does well moving at an angle outside of the pocket, but in the same vein that Isreal has a method of coming in at a side angle, strafing along his opponent and coming back out at another angle, I'd like to see Volkanovski do something similar. They call it in city kickboxing the L stepping, right? Because you're stepping in like at an L and then coming back out at an L, and you create like a almost like a football goalkeeper side. But I'd like to see that because it stops the oncoming pressure from Holloway, because he's going to have to pivot his body at all motions to follow you. And if that's happening, we know that Volkanovski has that wicked jab. We know that he has kicks to wear him off. For Max, I agree. He can't just blunder on in and try and pressure and wilt you. It's not going to work. Volkanovski's jab is too tailored. It's too intelligent. It's too smart. What I think I want to see from Max is similar to what we saw in the second, but I think I want him to, and this is going to be really difficult to do, but go in, land the impactful shots, and mid-combination, come out, wait for the counter, and then counter the counter. right? Because Alexander Volkanovski is a one-handed fighter predominantly, that jab is the main weapon, and it's a beautiful weapon. Let's see Max take a step in, land one, land two, come out, find the jab, and go all the way back in again. Let's see that. And for Volkanovski, like I said, can he land the jab at an angle? And can he come out at an angle? So Max is strafing in past him. And can he land high kicks from that? Can he land body work from that? I think that's the game plan that I'd like to see from both of them. But who the fuck knows what we're going to see? Shawnee knows.
Shawnee knows.
I know. I don't know. I just want to come in. I love everything Harry said there, and I'll throw it over to you. I find it very interesting. And a theory I had a while back was all fighters defend in a certain way. Like some fighters defend with their feet. Some fighters, get their hands up and defend like that. Some fighters defend by going forward. Some fighters defend with their face. Alexander Volkanovski defends with his jab first and foremost, but he also defends with the right hand, as I said, and with dipping his head down and tucking his chin. I want, and I would agree with what you said there. Rose Namajunas beat Ioane and Jacek in the first fight, doing exactly that L-shaped movement, beats the forward and back pressure of someone fighting out of a Muay Thai stance, out of a pressure type of fighter, similar to Max Holloway. And he's not Muay Thai, but you get what I mean with the pressure. But to do that, he has to change his whole defensive game. And I think a lot of Volkanovski's work is actually based on that defensive game and the exact way he fights. And, he's kind of, it's not a shoulder roll, but the shoulder rolly type of movements on the inside, tucking the chin. He literally stands like that. I'm probably blocking the mic now, but literally like a palm blocking that side of the face. You think that's not going to fucking work, but it does work from a lot of times, apart from that second Max Holloway fight. But that is so it's so detailed the way we can't break it down as well as he does, or whatever. But the way he does it, it's so detailed and so smart and so quick that he has done it for so long that he's going to stick to it. I don't think that's a thing he can change. And if he changes his offensive ability, I think or his offensive game, as Harry suggested there, I think he'll have to change that defensive game as well, because you'll be fighting in different areas.
Harry, real quick,
just with one last final point. The other thing I think for Volkanovski that I would like to see, there's two things I want to talk about. The first one is what I'd like to see is finish every single fucking combination with a leg kick. Every single one. If you're strafing on the left-hand side, and this was some of the stuff that did the most damage to Vettori and Costa, because of the weight distribution that's happening as you strafe from side to side, you can garner more gravity and more rotational power into your leg kicks, right? If you're asking Max Holloway to bounce into the pocket because he's not just walking you down, zombie-esque, coming at you, he's going to need pop. He's going to need power in those legs. If there isn't pop and power in those legs, and we saw in the first fight how effective the leg kicks were, and we saw a change in the second fight, slam those fucking leg kicks in as much as possible. Is Volkanovski going to get taken down? He's got great takedown defense, and Max, I think, will go to that as a subsidiary. But if you're able to strafe from side to side, and you're able to wade off the bouncing in pressure that Max may throw at you, and you can land the leg kicks, they will total up, and they're also impactful strikes. The second thing I will say, and this is the last thing, sorry, Shawnee, I know you're excited. The last
I've
thing
only 5 words.
Is Max Holloway's never been dropped, and he's been in some wars. Is now the time?
His chin has to go sometime, Sean.
It could, just on that, and I promise, what Harry said there, I would agree with, but the stance the last time from Holloway and the further out took away the leg kick, we didn't see half as much of it. Yair kicked the fuck out of his leg. Even Cater kicked the leg a bit, but Volkanovski in the second fight didn't after he did in the first fight. I love that, I love that outside stance in the Volkanovski fight for Max Holloway. But because he fights in such a forward-going manner, Harry's exactly right there. He has taken so many shots. We saw with Frank Yeager. We see with all these other guys. You don't ride for free. There's only so many shots you can take. And I know I've picked Holloway to win by KO, but maybe it'll be Volkanovski by KO. Anyway, the two of you talk about me and Harry are going muting our mics for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, you're going to force me. Do you know, like those presidential...
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
It's like those presidential... Yeah, it's like those presidential debates where I'm like, wrap it up, please, Mr. Sheehan, and all that. Wrap it up, Mr. Powell. I think the main points that I wanted to focus on, you guys broke it down exceptionally well. And for me, it comes down to number one, how each other reacts to whatever game plan is in place. And number two is, what is that game plan? Who has got together the best game plan? You know, Max Holloway's team, a very good team. I think with Volkanovski, he has the joys of Joe Lopez and Eugene Behrman to kind of work on it and devise a game plan as well. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top. And I'm very, very curious to hear what you have to think about everything that has been said so far, Spencer. And it has been a lot.
So I think the lads have done a wonderful job, as expected. So this fight, to me, there's so many questions, and like Shawnee, I'm and Harry as well. I like all of us. I'm fucking just cannot wait for this fight. And if you wanted to make this the main event, I would have absolutely no objection, because I think what Shawnee said of the excitement and the history and being able to put the trilogy at the top of the show kind of makes that the obvious bit, right? Like, it draws people in a little more when you say, here we go with Volkanovski Holloway 3, as opposed to Adesanya and Jared Cannonier, who most people maybe not don't know, but certainly aren't as excited by as they are this trilogy. The things that I'm looking for here, Harry touched on it and Sean touched on it as well. You don't ride for free. Max has been in a lot of wars. Is there a point at some point where this starts to catch up to him, where all of these battles, it's been 5 or 6 straight fights where it's been 25 minutes. And yep, he's looked great in a bunch of them. And he's had moments where he's dominated a bunch of those fights, right? Beat the absolute face off Calvin Kattar. Didn't take a lot coming back, but at some point it just adds up. He started when he was 18. He's been in there since he was 20 in the UFC. It catches up to you. I also think coming out of those first 2 fights with Max, we've seen Alexander Volkanovski level up in these last 2 fights. I think this is a guy whose confidence and whose skill level is continuing to improve and continuing to evolve. And we've seen that in those last 2 fights against Brian Ortega, where he took literally Brian Ortega's 2 best weapons, his 2 best chokes, deep as they can be, and came out of them, and then beat the shit out of him instantly. Got out of that guillotine, got up, and still won the round. And then went out and absolutely trucked the Korean Zombie in a way, like, fine, you want to say Zombie's a little older, he's this, he's that, he's whatever. We haven't seen anybody put it on the Zombie like that, the way that Volkanovski did. And I think he's a guy that is coming into this. I talked to him before the second fight, and he said, look, I need to go out here and make it definitive. And it's hard against Max Holloway. But you know what? I think he goes into this one pretty pissed off that he's got to fight Max yet again, and pretty upset that he's still having to listen to all of this talk about, well, Max is the real champ and Max is still the best and all of this, and people want to rate Max ahead of him. I think he goes into this one looking to make a real statement. And on the opposite side, doing the coach conversation piece for this one, talking with James Krause, I really agree with what Krause said about this fight from the Max standpoint. You can't go out there and think that you've won 3 rounds. You can't go out there and come back and feel, I think I'm up. Go out there and get it. If you're going to beat Alexander Volkanovski, you have got to get in his face and fight the shit out of him for 25 minutes. It can't be trade shots. It can't be the first 2 fights, because we've seen, even if they're close, we've seen Volkanovski is going to make adjustments. He's going to do the right things to beat you, because he's always active. He makes the right reads. He makes the right adjustments. He is a very, as Krause put it, optically smart fighter for judges, because he is always active. He's always touching you. There's always little things going on. So I think those first 2 rounds, as Harry said, are going to be fascinating, because if it's close after those first 2 rounds, whoever is in Max's corner and whoever is going to be giving him the most advice needs to tell him to just go out there and fight this fucking dude. Not MMA him, not stick to the game plan, not be smart and pick your spots. Go and get him, because that's the only way you're going to beat him. I don't know if he can go out there and just outpoint it. Obviously he can, literally, but I don't think you want to try to be in that fight with Alexander Volkanovski, because I don't think Alexander Volkanovski wants to be in that fight. I don't think he has any interest in this being as close as the first 2 fights. And I think he's going to come out showing some new wrinkles and taking some new shots at Max Max Holloway. And Shawnee looks really interested to get in here with something. Come on, boy.
I just thought of something as you were saying there, and I went and I looked at his record. Has Max Holloway ever won a close fight? Like, if you think about it, right? Yair Rodriguez, you could say that was a relatively close fight. Cater, no. Volkanovski, he lost both of them. Edgar, he blew him out of the water. Pereira, close fight, lost that. Ortega blew him out of the water, blew Aldo out of the water twice, destroyed Pettis, Lamas, Stevens, Oliveira, Swanson, Miller, Coruscant, Collard, Feely, Chubb. McGregor, lost to him, lost the split decision to Dennis Bermudez. 10 years ago, he fought Leonard Garcia and won a split decision. He's never won a close one.
No,
that's
and
weird. Like.
And I would say that the Yair fight is more that he kind of picked his spots a little more than Yair made it super close. I think when Max wanted to go, he was good. He was landing. And if he wanted to be on the offensive the whole time and make that a very clear, like, I don't know that it could have been the Cater fight, but it could have been less close on the cards than it was. But you can't do that against Alexander Volkanovski because he's just too fucking good. There's no holes in this dude's game. And he's at that point of, I'm tired of listening to all of this nonsense about Max Holloway and having to keep fucking facing this guy when I'm beating everybody. Like, we haven't mentioned that Alexander Volkanovski is on a absolutely ridiculous 21 fight winning streak and undefeated in the UFC and just a absolute, like, near perfect fighter. He might be the best fighter on the planet. We don't have to get into the conversation, but he's on that very, very short fucking list of possible most complete best fighters on the planet. And yet he's out here having to face a guy that he's already beat twice again.
Yeah. I feel that in this fight, and if it's going to be a close fight, and I think it is going to be a close fight, what it's going to come down to is impactful shots. And I think from what I've seen so far is that Volkanovski will just land the more impactful strikes. And it's something that Max Holloway has to improve on too, and landing with more ferocity, because that's what the judges are looking for, especially in close fights here. And, you know, my bet, I know me and you were talking, Sean, your bet or your flyer of the week was somewhat like for this to go to a split decision or majority decision at plus 300 at the same time as picking Holloway to win by second round knockout. So you're really covering yourself there. Well done. And he's ripping it up. It's all done. My bet was, I think Volkanovski is going to be good enough to get the job done. I do think it's going to be a close fight. And at plus 500 for Volkanovski to win by a split decision or majority decision is the bet that I'm going to go for. And it's just the scenario that I can see that this fight is going to play out in. And it's just an absolutely tremendous fight between two elite level guys. And I really, really can't wait to see that. Kind of after talking about both fights now, I'm leaning towards this one too, kind of wishing it was a bit more on at the top of the card or at the main event status, but whatever, we'll deal with what we have. And we'll move on to the next fight. We'll go through the main card as quickly as we can now, and then we're going to talk some Ian Garry. Next up on the card is Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barberena, two welterweights that are at the end of their career somewhat, I guess. So Robbie Lawler at 40, Brian Barberena in his mid-30s right now, don't owe anything to anybody. Harry, how do you feel about this fight? And how do you see it going down?
I think Bam Bam just has more ways to win. I think that the aggressive nature of his grappling, in that it's not great, but he's just dogged with it, you know? He can just go in and he's going to push Robbie against the fence. And this is very disrespectful to Colby Covington now, but bear with me. Like, Colby Covington set the blueprint on how you beat this current version of Robbie Lawler, right? It's you touch him, you touch him, you touch him, you shoot on his hips, you shoot on his hips, you touch him again, you shoot on his hips, you touch him again, you threaten the back, you touch him again, you shoot on his hips, and those are the way that you do things. At this point in his career, Robbie is who Robbie is. We're not going to see a Robbie version 3.0. We're not going to see massive evolutions in his game. He is a big one-hitter quitter, stand in front of you, slam you in the fucking face, and what happens, you know?
Someone's ringing. Is that you, Harry?
Yeah, that's me, man.
I thought you were giving yourself some backing music there to go with the analysis of this fight. I'll just go over to you too quickly, Sean, until Harry sorts your stuff out there. You know, this is a pick 'em fight but you kind of fancy Robbie Lawler in this one.
I do. Harry, I think your mic is gone, so if you want to go out and come back in while we're talking. I do. Do you know why? And maybe I'm wrong. Actually, listen to Harry there. I probably am wrong. I feel like Barberena will, at this stage of his career, as you mentioned, he'll want to have a bit of a war with Robbie Lawler, maybe. You know? He went in there with Matt Brown last time out, and they had a bit of a war with each other. And he did do a bit of what Harry was saying there, but I don't know, and I feel like that's probably a stupid thing to do against Robbie Lawler because he still hits pretty hard and all. But yeah, look, I don't care who wins this fight. All I'm hoping for in this fight is a good fight. I hope we don't get a Colby Covington type fight, and we might. You know, Harry broke it down very well there. We might. I hope we get a war. What do you think, Spencer?
I just want to know why you assholes are saying Brian Barberena's at the end of his rope. Like, he's on a 2-fight winning streak. He's 33. He's back to being healthy. Like, this dude ain't done. Like, I talked to him before, and it's not just because I talked to him before this fight, and Bam's a good dude. But, like, he's in that point where he's finally got a bunch of legitimately scary health things out of the way. This is his 4th fight in 12 months. He is one of those guys that needs to stay active. If he's off for 6 months, you see a little bit of a regression, and it takes kind of getting ramped back up.
Did he? The kind of opinion I formulated around that, though, was that he fought out his contract the last time, and he was saying that if he didn't get a contract renewal, that he was thinking about retirement.
I mean, so there's a difference between thinking about retirement and being at the end of your rope as a fighter, right? Like, he's got stuff going on, and he's set. Like, he doesn't need to be doing this. They do well with the family farm that they own, with the property that they have, where they live in Tennessee, all of those things. He very much is still thirsting to make a run here. Like, we sat and talked for half an hour leading into this about, you kind of get to, and I think we've talked about it on here, when you're young and you're full of athleticism, but you don't have that experience, it's one thing. Then you get to the point that he's at where he's 33 and the athleticism's kind of gone a little bit, but all of a sudden the experience is there and the savvy's there and the understanding is there, and it just becomes that perfect kind of Venn diagram, and he feels he's right in the middle of it, and he can go out and have this. And I see the boys really, really looking forward to jumping in. So I'm going to cut myself short and let them have it.
I don't know. There's woeful excitement going over there. And
they're both excited. Go on.
Go on, Shawnee.
Harry, your mic is fucked again. We recorded that exact thing that Spencer there. We did like an hour-long podcast on that yesterday.
Nice.
So yeah, it's Speaker's Corner coming soon.
He just feels like a guy that is at that point where he's coming off the good win over Matt Brown in Matt Brown's backyard. Yes, he's always somebody that could be in a war. We joked going into this that his coach told him going into the Matt Brown fight and coming out of it, look, you're allowed to not get in these fucking dog fights where you have to go through this shit. Feel free to get him out of here as quickly as possible. I don't know if you can do that with Robbie Lawler, but as Harry was saying, Robbie is who he is at this point. He's 40 years old. He says all the right things about, I want to continue competing, especially at a high level. I don't know that we've seen Robbie Lawler at a high level in the last, 4 years, 5 years, maybe? Like, what's the last really good Robbie Lawler win? It's a long time ago.
It's Nick Diaz. Come on.
I forgot that fight happened.
I know. I'm only joking. Don't yeah, I mean, there's not too much more to say. I kind of scooted over the fight ahead of that, which was Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. This is a fight that UFC are just shamelessly trying to push Alex Pereira up the rankings and try and get him a shot, try and develop that storyline with Izzy, who he has beaten and knocked out in kickboxing before. I think, they're doing it. If it wasn't the middleweight division, I'd be a little bit upset about it, but it is the middleweight division and they kind of need to do that. Aren't I right in saying that, Sean?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Continue, please.
No, you go ahead. That was my segue.
Yeah, look, this division is rubbish. They need to create contenders, and one will be created here. The winner will fight against Isreal Adesanya. We'll all be happy. It's a thing we can't really have in other divisions because they're so good. Look at Featherweight. Arnold Allen was created. Emmett was created last week. They were all created. And also as well, if you want to send us super chats, feel free. You could send us like a $5 or $2. Look, Patrick G in there, send us on 2. Anyone else listening there, send us. I'll pay you back that when you call over there tomorrow. So what was I talking about? Strickland Pereira. It's an interesting fight, I think, in a way, because It's two lads. Also, Sean Strickland, he answers that question we've all been asking. What if Stipe Miocic was a middleweight dickhead? I think he does it very, very well, to be fair. But he, he's a good fighter. He can box. He's a bit of wrestling, bit of jiu-jitsu, a bit of well-roundedness. Alex Pereira is apparently a very good foot boxer. I wouldn't know anything about that shite. Hasn't been great in MMA. Almost got submitted by the biggest jobber in the shittiest division in the UFC. He'll almost certainly lose this fight if Sean Strickland isn't the biggest idiot in the UFC. Now, Sean Strickland probably is the biggest idiot in the UFC. So this could go anywhere, lads. I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure.
Now that Bragimov is not in the UFC, he is definitely the biggest idiot at the UFC.
Absolutely. Definitely the biggest idiot outside of the cage. We are going to find out, Harry, if he's going to be an idiot inside the cage, because if he fights the way we think he should fight, you have went out and said he's the easiest pick on this card and at the best price as well. I think that at plus 100 he's a fantastic price at plus 100. I think the fact that he's probably not lower is the fear that if Pereira does catch him, he will cause some serious damage. I mean, Strickland has to come in here, Harry, and look to take the fight down. It's as simple as that.
Yes. Is my sound okay? Yes. Wonderful. Thanks, gents. That's the positive feedback we need in our life, lads. 3 lads immediately thumbs up. Let's go. Yeah, look, I think if Strickland doesn't come in here and isn't looking immediately to grapple and find the hips of Pereira, then there's big questions, right? I mean, obviously when I say immediately, I don't mean just run across the cage and dive headfirst onto his hips, but allow Pereira to think that we're going to do some of the foot boxing in small gloves and then push him against the fence, and let's see the clinch work, and let's see the cage wrestling. Let's see the open mat wrestling. Let's maybe not spend too much time in a tie clinch with Alex Pereira, but a tie clinch against the fence is very different to an open mat tie clinch where he can get underhooks and use them more effectively to land his knees and all these sorts of things. If I'm Sean Strickland, Shawnee Podcasts has the both correct and incorrect view that experience is the biggest factor in you being an elite level fighter. And Sean Strickland has a lot of experience, right? He does have a lot of experience. He has a lot of high level fighting experience. The guys that he trains with, he has Magomed Ankalaev, who is Sean's favorite fighter after David Jackson. And that guy will be available for takedowns all of the time. Right. So I think if I'm Sean Strickland, I'm fighting the smart fight here. I'm going in. I'm really testing Alex Pereira's get-up game. And I suspect that the get-up game is nowhere near as good as the top game of Strickland. And we either see a 3-round decision or he gets him out of there with some form of submission.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, Harry. I mean, and we have to also remember here, Spencer, as well, is that, this could be somewhat labeled as a number 1 contenders fight. They're definitely, if Pereira gets the win, he for sure is taking on Izzy next. They've been asking him questions. He's been talking about him and talking about knocking him out. Izzy has said a few things. Sean Strickland seems to be the guy who's been put in there to, give Pereira the best chance of winning. That's what the UFC are doing right here. They've matched up Pereira with who they believe is the best matchup for him to get to the title shot. But Sean Strickland must be thinking the exact same thing here. A win for him should reward him a shot at the title as well.
Oh, he's 100% aware of what's happening here and is looking to use it to his advantage. Talk to him about it. Said, you're in a position, you're on a whole bunch of wins in a row, undefeated in the division. Why in the Christ are you fighting this guy who's 2-0, but has the death touch and is clearly getting pushed? And he said, what's my other option? So my other option is fight Rob Whittaker. Robert Whittaker to me is a much tougher fight. And if it's not Robert Whittaker, I've got to sit around and wait. And I have no interest in waiting. I want to fight. So sure, I'll fight this dude. Harry mentioned the name that is important to me in this, and it's Magomed Ankalaev. Listening to Sean Strickland talk about them train is the one few kind of moments where Sean Strickland doesn't seem like an absolute sociopath. And if he can go the rounds he seems to go with Magomed Ankalaev as frequently as he does, because the two of them are kind of just off by themselves at Extreme Couture because nobody wants to fuck around with them, then he should go out here and absolutely grind the Christ out of Alex Pereira. Now, Sean acknowledges, this dude hits me once, my face could fall apart. That is a very real possibility. This dude is scary. He scares the fuck out of me. Like from an actual, like you just look at him, he's got the oh fuck factor because he's 6'4". He hits like an absolute truck, and every fight starts standing and I have to get over to him and put him on the ground. We're going to see if he can get there. I think he absolutely gets the title shot if he beats this guy. Like you can't have, I mean, you certainly can do whatever the Christ you please. You're the UFC. We've seen guys on longer winning streaks. I don't think we're going to get to it, but I don't think Andre Muniz is beating Uriah Hall and then getting a title shot.
No,
it's just not happening.
I could.
If Sean Strickland wins his 6th straight and moves to 21-0 at middleweight, I think we kind of got to just get him in there.
Yeah,
but we'll see. Like this is one of those ones that Strickland at plus money is a really good bet. At whatever whatever the odds are on the outcomes is a good bet just from a value standpoint. But it could also be one of those fights where Alex Pereira hits him with the first couple of shots and we're moving on.
Strickland was training with Johnny Eblen too, wasn't he? And we saw how good he was last week.
Strickland went down to ATT. He went down to ATT specifically to train with Artem Levin.
Artem Levin too.
Yeah, who fought Alex Pereira in glory. But you get in there and you're in there with Johnny Eblen, who won the Bellator title last week. There's a bunch of guys there. He's got good wrestlers and good training partners at Extreme Couture. This is where we see whether. So I think a lot of the Sean Strickland persona and Sean Stricklandness of him is for effect. It's to get a rise out of people. It's to just be that unfiltered dickhead that he is. And like, Sean is really an unfiltered dickhead. I've talked to him enough times that he's not our Sean Strickland, not Sean.
Our Sean is our Sean as well.
Podcast is a bit of an unfiltered dickhead at times as well, but he's also a wonderful, sweet man at times. Strickland is a bit of it. Like some of it is legit. Some of it is he's a dickhead and he's a bit of a misanthrope. But I think he's also a pretty smart guy when it comes to his craft and what he's doing. He won't ever say it himself. Trains with good people. He can fight like till I don't even know the words. He's a hell of a fighter, and he should go out there and he's got all the skills to dominate this guy and put himself in a championship fight. And it's just going to come down to if he actually wants that or not. As weird as that maybe sounds.
No, it doesn't sound weird. It definitely does, because it's interesting. Sometimes you could have to be careful what you wish for, but that is going to be it's one half of a little mini kind of a middleweight tournament that's going on. We will talk. Settle down, Harry. We will talk Munhoz later on, and we will talk Uriah Hall later on. But first, we must talk about the main card opener, and that is a fight between Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Pedro Munhoz in the bantamweight division. The toughest test of Sean O'Malley's career, in my opinion. A winnable fight for him, but a potential banana peel as well. That was a tongue twister. But I think with Sean O'Malley, his persona probably doesn't give his performances. People look at his persona and they don't give his performances as much respect as he deserves. Even though, he's only breaking into kind of fight top tier opponents now, top 15 guys, he has had a storied career so far in the UFC, coming through Dana White's Contender Series with that kind of knockout, that flashy knockout there. He has the foot injury against Chito Vera. He broke his toe in another fight and had to do an interview lying down on the canvas. He's kind of garnered these stories throughout his UFC career, but this is the big one for him. This is against Pedro Munhoz, who has fought the who's who in the bantamweight division, who's still dangerous. Munhoz on a downward kind of trajectory in his career. Sean O'Malley on an upward trajectory. We'll see who matches who in the main card opener. I'll hand it over to you, Sugar Sean Sheehan, to kind of talk me through that fight.
Yeah, I think Munhoz is way further down maybe than his ranking suggests. I don't think he is that tough test maybe he once was, and I would think Sean O'Malley will walk through him. But the one issue I would have with Sean O'Malley, and I don't have, maybe Harry has, or maybe Spencer has a good technical breakdown of this fight, but one thing I would say, and I said it before, and maybe something we haven't thought about as much, but you said it there, he got injured against Chito Vera, and okay, Chito Vera caused that injury, and he might say he didn't, but he did. And there was another fight as well. He was stretchered out afterwards, wasn't he? Bro, did you say he hurt his toe or foot or something?
Andre Sukumtath.
Yeah. O'Malley is not one of these guys like Robbie Lawler who will have his fucking lip falling off him, or who'll get through a broken foot, or will get through a broken hand or something like that. He is, you know, Wes Brown back in the day, or Paul Pogba, or fucking, you know, Henrik Mkhitaryan and Phil Jones. A bit class, like, and for an MMA fighter to be like fucking Michael Owen is not a good thing, you know. And Pedro Munhoz comes in here, hangs around for a while, and Sean O'Malley falls over and hurts his ankle, and it could be all over, you know. That's the one thing I would say about him here, because, and that's, I might sound glib and easy for me to say, and I'm half jokey in a way, but at the same time, you see guys at the very top level, you know, myself and Harry talked about it yesterday in that podcast that's coming up, but you have to have, in one way, luck, but in another way, you have to be unbelievably tough, not just tough mentally and tough physically, but your body has to be tough as well. And that's the most important thing in MMA, because if you have a chin that gets punched once and you get knocked out, you are never, and it's more important than experience even, and I said that yesterday, Harry, just shut up. It's you can have all the skills, you could be as skillful as Demetrius Johnson, but if you can't take a punch, if your body can't go through the rigors of a 15-minute fight, then you're fucking screwed. And that is something that Sean O'Malley, I don't think, has proven yet. I think he's good skills, as you said, a bit underrated in skills, maybe because of his persona and all of that, and maybe not. You know, Harry will tell you different. But I think a big thing, can he come through a war? Will Pedro Munhoz provide that? I don't think so, but that is a thing, maybe in this fight and definitely in future fights, that we need to look out for with Sean O'Malley, in my opinion.
Yep, indeed. We've been cursing our way through this this preview show. Hopefully Mike Mazzulli isn't listening to us, or we could have fines coming our way. Harry, you picked Pedro Munhoz for this fight. You think he does have enough to get Sean O'Malley out of there, or at least to get his hand raised?
Yeah, so Mike, okay? Mike, okay, wonderful. Thanks to Pat Sheehan in the DMs as well, by the way, trying to sort me out. Great man. Look, Sean touched on it. Right, the other Sean. There is one big difference between Sugar Sean Sheehan and Sugar Sean O'Malley. One of them is a tough bastard, and one of them is Sean O'Malley. Right? Like, I'm sorry, there is one thing that you need, and Sean touched on it. Right? Our Sean, the real Sean. He touched on it that if you're going to get to the top tier, you need to be a tough bastard. You don't get through a Brian Ortega fully locked in guillotine and a fully locked in triangle and then go out and beat the fucking brakes off a lad if you're not a tough bastard. You don't come through some of the fights that we've seen even a Max Holloway come through if you're not a tough bastard. Sean O'Malley is never, ever, ever the nail. Right? He refuses to be the nail, and not because he's skillful enough to navigate away from being the nail. He just finds a way out. Oh, my foot's hurt, or this or that or the next thing. Now, legitimate injuries are fine. I understand them. But Shawnee Podcast touched on Robbie Lawler. You could break Robbie Lawler's leg and he's going to try and find a way to look like his leg's grand, and he's going to continue to try and fight, right?
Pick it up and probably beat you with it, maybe. I'd say that's what Robbie Lawler would do.
I fucking need this, lads. Like, let me just fucking hop around the cage here. I think that Sean O'Malley's persona actually overstates his skills. I think he's pretty good. He has lovely 1-2s. When he's moving forward, his range management is brilliant. But you don't get clipped by Eddie fucking Wineland before you put him away. Fair play to you. But you don't get clipped by Eddie fucking Wineland if you're an elite fighter. You just don't. Cody Stamann fucking didn't, and he's not an elite fighter, right? I think that Sean O'Malley is hittable. I think his stance is too wide for MMA. And whilst I think that he is still a fighter that has so much potential and such a high trajectory, we are looking at him being given a fight in Pedro Munhoz that he can and probably should win. But you know, another fighter that's never been dropped in his UFC career? Pedro Munhoz. Right? So Pedro Munhoz, although I agree with everything that Sean is saying, he's on a downward trajectory in his career. He's getting slower. He's getting older. He's one raw, tough bastard. And what's he going to do? He'll happily kick that fucking leg. He'll happily get inside and try and drop those shots on you. He'll happily try and mix it up with the wrestling. Do I think he's going to take him down or dominate him? No, I don't. I think Sean Sugar O'Malley is a superior athlete at this point. I think he is quicker. But do I think he's going to win this fight? I don't know. I think Pedro Munhoz is more than happy to be the nail. And I picked Pedro Munhoz because I think he will prove to Sean O'Malley that you have to be the nail at times.
Yeah, like I definitely wouldn't snuff at that opinion at all. It's that big question that's kind of hanging over this fight, Spencer, is how far has Sean O'Malley progressed, and can Pedro Munhoz kind of make him feel uncomfortable, put him on the back foot, force him to take some damage, and force him to answer some questions about himself as well. You know, he hasn't had that. You know, Halam Pavia, who O'Malley fought in his last fight, this is, you know, even though Munhoz isn't where he used to be, it's still a big jump up in kind of level of competition here, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, you said it off the top that he's maybe not gotten the credit he's due for the performances he's had. I would say it's the exact opposite. He's gotten a ton of credit for beating the ghost of Eddie Wineland and the ghost of a few other guys, you know, the ghost of Thomas Almeida and a couple of, like, people went crazy about that fight with Chris Moutinho, and like, Jesus Christ, really? We're going crazy about him beating the face off of Chris Moutinho, who then got the shit kicked out of him in his next fight, saved in the first round and sent back to the regional circuit. And we're going crazy about Sean O'Malley from that. Like, this is the test. And I think he can pass it. Absolutely has the skills, talents, abilities, all of those things that he can pass this and answer all of those questions and show that he is a legit guy going forward. It sure ain't going to be easy, though. Like, this is, as Harry said, the tough bastard you got to get through in this division. And like, Pedro Munhoz has been that guy. He has no delusions that, you know, he's suddenly going to just start a run. He knows where he's at in life. He knows where he's at in this division. But he ain't taking a backseat to anybody for easy nothing. Like, he will be in your face. He is happy to trade. We saw it in the Cody Garbrandt fight, right? We saw it in the second fight with Jimmy Rivera, which was even more recently. He is going to go out there and take the absolute best shot you have. And when you're Sean O'Malley and that shot is normally putting people down and Pedro Munhoz goes nowhere, what do? What's your reaction? Because he's going to throw one back at you that's going to get your chin. And he's going to slam those kicks in. And if you panic wrestle, he's going to wrap up your neck because he's a legit fucking black belt too. Like, a real deal legit black belt. And so this is I'm pumped for this fight because for all of the praise and all of the attention Sean O'Malley has got, this is the test. The only time he's been in there with a guy that has moved up the division and had success is Chito Vera. And he lost inside a round. You can say injury, fine. Chito Vera kicked him in the leg and his body couldn't hold up. It's the Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic thing, right? They said, yeah, you don't want to win like that. And he said, look, my body's tougher. He's a great fighter. His body can't handle this. Mine can. Sean O'Malley might be that guy. He might just be a guy that can't handle the actual rigors of being in tough fights. Whether that's mental, physical, whatever. You go back to his amateur career, and this is a deep dive, right? But Carlos Lozoya, who's a guy that trains with Joe Lozon, fights for Fury FC. We're going to see him in the UFC at some point. He fought Sean it was Carlos's amateur debut. They're in a close fight. It gets into the 5th round. They're scrambling around and fighting around on the ground, and Carlos lands a couple shots that are, you know, in that Mohawk area, but close. And Sean O'Malley did the whoa, back of the head. It was in Montana, where Sean is from. Carlos got disqualified. There might be a little bit of I don't like it coming the other way in Sean O'Malley that we just haven't seen yet, right? Like, we just haven't seen it. We've given him all this praise for all these guys that he's beat. Aaron Bronstetter put it out the other day. Guys, after they've fought Sean O'Malley, are 1-8 in the UFC. Now, is that because he's absolutely throttling guys and they're just not the same? Or is he fighting kind of scrubs a little bit and guys that he's just getting them at the right time, right? Like, is he getting a little bit of the Mayweather, catch them when they're not quite ready and catch them when they're a little bit past their prime? We're going to find out on Saturday because Pedro Munhoz is a tough fucking out.
Fucking sure is. And it will be
Find me all you want, Mike Mazzulli.
Yeah. Fuck you, Mike Mazzulli. Yeah, that's funny. Sean, Ian Garry is back in action this Saturday night against Gabriel Green, whatever you want to call him. This to me is going to be a good test for Ian Garry. Maybe not the toughest one. Jack Grant, I'm still putting up there as probably Ian Garry's toughest test to date so far, including Gabe Green. But nonetheless, Gabe Green is one of those guys who likes to come forward, and he doesn't like to make things easier for you. Has recently had some surgery on his eyes too, and we've seen the results of that, where he came in and really looked like a different fighter in his last fight, did Green. Ian Garry went in there last time against Darian Weeks, won a comfortable decision, was in control for every second of that fight. Did draw some criticism, probably down to the fact that he talked a big game and didn't deliver. But from the likes of us who have been watching Ian Garry from the get-go, and I say us, I mean all four of us, it was a good performance for Ian Garry the last time out. And I think that, he's going to look to build upon it here. Is the pressure on him a little bit more to finish this fight, or can he go out and win another comfortable decision as well this fight?
I'll be interested to know. I don't think we got a sense of any of that from his media yesterday. I think it was very much cookie cutter sort of stuff. So we didn't get a sense of whether the reaction from the last fight has kind of changed. And the only thing he kind of did say is that, like, I went back and I watched the performance and I wasn't happy with it, which, he always says, and most fighters always say, especially if it's not as impressive maybe as people are expecting. But having said that, I think that'd be the wrong way to do it. I think if he goes back and looks at that performance and picks holes in it in a major way, and you can always pick holes in something, but it picks holes in it in a major way and tries to go out and get the finish this time, I think that's a bad idea. Like, that was a very good performance last time out. And people after it, the reaction after it was lots of people who maybe haven't seen Ian Garry fight in his last 5 or 6 fights and have shown that he can finish and he can, get submissions and he can get knockouts. Well, Ian Garry needs to show, or anyone at this stage of their career, they need to show experience, and they need to get experience, and they need to have 15 minutes in the UFC. So when the next time they get 15 minutes in the UFC, or it goes to the 4th round or the 5th round, then they're prepared for that. And he obviously went there with Jack Grant, and shout out James Sheehan as well. That might be the toughest fight of Ian Garry's career, because he's a fucking dog and a great fucking fighter as well. But I think it was very misplaced, the criticism of Ian Garry. I think he was, even though he got, was it the 2nd round finish in the first fight? I think there was way more to be critical of him in that one, because he got hit and he got hurt, and he didn't fight the way he should fight. And in the second fight, he did. He said it himself that Darian Weeks was very defensive, parked the bus, and he kind of, bit like Isreal Adesanya at times, and he did it better than Adesanya does when lads park the bus against him. There wasn't, that opening up to leave yourself open, which is smart especially for a fighter in his younger days. I think Gabe Green will be more open than Darian Weeks. I think he'll come forward more. We saw against Johan Lainez, he came forward so much that he almost got his senses taken away from him, and in fact did for a couple of seconds probably, but came back and did well in that fight, obviously, and we know the eye situation and everything. He's a very different fighter than his fights a couple of fights ago. I was watching a couple of fights of his before this, and I was like, is there 2 Gabe Greens in the UFC? He's so different. So there isn't that much tape to watch on, like, the current iteration, I suppose, of Gabe Green. Switch stances, fights out of the southpaw a lot, so that's a bit different. But Ian, I think, was telling Tio yesterday he trains with Michael Johnson, who's a good guy probably to prepare for Gabe Green, because Gabe is fast and fast southpaw. Michael Johnson's a very fast southpaw striker, so probably a very good lad to have there, preparing for you a little bit smaller as well. And Ian Garry's always going to play the bigger man. But what I'm hoping to see here from Ian Garry is another 15-minute performance, honestly. And if he produced that, it'd be all well and good. If you're an Irish MMA fan looking for Ian Garry going forward, I'd nearly rather, not necessarily rather that, but if he produced that, I think it'd actually be better for him in the long run than a first round knockout. But if he gets the first round knockout, it builds the hype and everything like that. But having said that, and I'll throw it over to you here because I've gone back and forth, not the easiest fight in the world. As you said, you could argue it's his toughest fight, no, without a shadow of a doubt. Sheehan, Grant, this one as well, tough fights. Gabe Green is not a guy who will go out of there easy, as we saw in the last fight, got knocked down and came back up. Ian will probably have to hurt him 2 or 3 times. He'll have to stay calm and finish him if he gets that opportunity. If he doesn't, he'll have to stay calm throughout the whole fight. So very good test at this stage of Ian Garry's career, and one that he will need to show that he is at that level to come through.
Yeah, indeed he will. Spencer, I'm curious to see what you're hoping to see from Ian Garry in this fight. And you know, someone per se looking from the outside in with no connection to Irish MMA, do you feel that the criticism of his last performance was warranted? Because I know you've seen a bunch of almost all of his previous fights as well before that fight. I mean, is there a progression there that you did see with Ian Garry?
Yeah, there's progression there. The criticism is almost never warranted. It's just that the MMA community, the expectations are so high, and there's a whole bunch of assholes, including myself, like fully acknowledging that I'm one of them. It's one of those things, right? He comes in, he's heralded as this next big thing. He's presented as the next Irish star. And then when it isn't, even the follow-up to the Jordan Williams fight where he goes out and gets to finish the last second of the first round in Madison Square Garden, it's a giant stage, and he gets, you know, people are talking about the tweets back and forth with him and Connor and all of these different things. When he goes out and just has a learning experience performance, a growth performance against a guy that didn't really want to fight him, there's going to be that blowback of, oh, well, he didn't look. It just is what it is. This is one, Harry and I were talking about it offline at the start of the week. If Ian Garry is as good as we think he is, this is an opportunity for him to go out and kind of show that a little bit. Whether that's a finish or just thoroughly outclassing Gabe Green, we could see that on Saturday. And if he's not quite as far along in his progression, or maybe he's not as great of a talent as we think, this becomes a little bit closer fight because Gabe Green does do some things reasonably well. So for me, as sort of the outsider of this group, this is one of those ones I'm paying attention to closely because I want to get a better read of both who Ian Garry is and where he's at in his development on Saturday.
Indeed, and that's kind of what I'm interested to see as well, you know, and I'm curious to hear what you think about the overall situation with Ian Garry as well, Harry, and maybe how he might get it done in this fight with Gabe Green.
Mic check. Mic check. Excellent. So I did a bit of a deep dive on this fight. And I think, firstly, what do I think about the situation? I think Ian Garry just needs to win, you know? Shawnee says that experience is the most important thing. And I mean, you know, he's wrong.
Don't overplay it now, like don't overplay what I've been saying.
That's a fucking thing. We're gonna meme this until it's dead. I think something that Ian Garry has very openly talked about, both in the lead up to his last fight and in this fight, is that he's picked a gym where he can acquire the most skills possible. Yeah, he can go in and he's going to be in a room of guys that can take him down 100 times in a session. He's going to be in a room where he's not the best striker in the room. He's going to be in a room where he's not the best guy on the ground. He's in a room that can provide him the steepest skill acquisition learning curve that he can find. Well, the fight then is an ability for him to go and test the skills that he's acquired in the gym. So why not? Look, if a finish presents itself, you take the finish, obviously, right? This is fighting. I understand. But if I'm Ian Garry, I'm going in not for experience, but as a test bed to see whether the skills that I've acquired over the last 8, 9, 10 weeks camp is real or not, right? Like, it's the same as any competition. Is the stuff that I'm working on in the gym working? Right? Is the stuff that I'm doing actually legitimate against a guy that's going to try and stop me from doing the things? Right? And let me just go to my notes here on some of the stuff about Gabe Green. Yes, he's a southpaw. Shawnee's already mentioned that, but he is happy to switch out of orthodox. He switches out of range and he switches quite nicely, right? Which is something that will be useful against Ian Garry, because if you're switching lazy, he'll step in and he'll throw his jabs, he'll throw his high kicks. And, you know, that's something we saw against Rustam Akman, who didn't switch stances nicely when he was exiting out of the pocket, and we saw what happened there. He has nice enough movement, and he baits leg kicks well to try and enter the pocket. My fear with Gabe Green is kind of the thing that Shawnee touched on. I'm going to butcher this fella's name, and Spencer's going to probably need to help me. But Linus? Yeah,
Close enough.
the guy with tattoos and bald head, right? That fella. He's not the quickest guy. He's not the longest guy. He's not the best striker. But he was able to find overhand rights on Gabe Green quite often. Why? Because Gabe Green sticks around in the pocket a little bit too long, and he admires his work a little bit too much, right? He throws his jab and he leaves it out there just a second too long. That's not really a situation you want to be in against Ian Garry, who is a smart striker, who is quick, who is long. And to Shawnee's point, when Gabe Green hit the mat, he was definitely out. You could see it in his body when he was out. And Lanus hit him with a coffin nail and woke him up. And Gabe Green immediately wrestled. Fair play to him. He stayed in the fight. But that, to me, shows you catch him in the right spot, he has a tendency to get dropped. And I don't think Ian Garry is going to be taken down as easily off the wrestle up. I think we saw against Jack Grant just how well he is able to negate some of those ground exchanges. So I find myself leaning heavily towards Ian Garry, but I think that Gabe Green can offer some interesting athletic questions. I think he's a really good athlete. He's a big man. He's very strong in the clinch, uses his physicality really well. And I think that if Ian finds himself pushed behind the tram lines like he did in the fight against Darian Weeks, we could see some very interesting exchanges there. I'd actually be really interested to see some clinch exchanges. I'd be really interested to see where Gary's takedown defense against the cage is, because I'm pretty confident it's good, but I'd really like to see it. You know, I think if I'm Ian Garry, the thing I'd love to see here is 15 minutes of really, really solid work.
Yeah. And I think that's what I would like to see too. I mean, look, at the stage is set for Ian Garry to go in there and get a knockout win and kind of hype up his name a little bit. But if he doesn't do that, I mean, okay, that's all right too. He gets another 15 minutes in the books against another decent guy. He gets a bit more experience about himself as well. And, you know, I don't know what's going on. He hasn't really captured the imagination of the Irish fans yet, Sean. I don't think a whole lot, to be honest. Not as much. I guess it's bad to start comparing him with Conor McGregor, especially at this stage of his career. But I mean, you'll tell me better than I would know over here in Canada. You're in Ireland right now. I mean, I remember every person and their mother used to be texting me about Conor McGregor whenever he was fighting and everything like that. And he just hasn't, you know, the move away from Ireland probably hasn't helped that fact, but that move away has probably drawn some unfair criticism towards Ian Garry as well in the long run. And I think we should just kind of be more focused now on what the most important thing is. And the most important thing is performances inside the cage. And he has been shown improvement upon improvement upon improvement, and he will continue to do that for the foreseeable future as well. Yeah. And this is a good night from the UFC think that of him. This is his third pay-per-view card to be on in a row. They're planning for his success. He's planning for his success. I think we just need to be a little bit fucking patient and wait for that success.
Yeah, on the Irish part quickly, because I know the lads want to move on and talk about the other fights as well. Look, Ian is definitely not as popular now in Ireland as he was a while back, or obviously as McGregor is. He needs UFC Dublin. You know, he needs to come in and get a big knockout in UFC Dublin, maybe the main event, maybe a co-main event or something like that. He needs that, because at the moment, what he is to Irish people is a guy who left, and a guy who went on with Isreal and said, I'm so glad I left Ireland. It was the best decision I ever made. And Irish people don't like that. Irish people do not like that. But they will forgive him for that, and they will forget that, more importantly, if it kind of changes for Ian. Like, I saw something going on today. It was like Ian Garry's in his hotel room now sticking old Conor McGregor quotes together for his post-fight interview. And it had like 1,500 likes or something. And I'm like, that's not very good for an up-and-coming, like look, someone like a Jack Shore or a Shemaev or a Rachmanov. We all love them and everyone likes them, and you want to be, I knew this guy before you knew him and all. And Ian Garry could be one of those guys, but it just feels like at the moment he's not. And maybe that's because of the connection that he had with McGregor the last time, and, you know, quoting McGregor and saying, I'm here to take over. And that's aside from the fighting. We've talked about the fighting as well, but I think that can change as well. And I think it will change if something happens big with the UFC Dublin stuff. But we saw McGregor before. He kind of, and he's, you know, this was a long time before now. I'm not talking about at the moment. But he kind of went out of favor a little bit with the Irish fans as well for a while. And then he kind of, he went on the Late Late Show once, and, he did a couple of interviews even with Andrew and stuff. And I think he kind of drew it back a little bit as well. I think Ian needs to realize where his butter is, or his bread is buttered as well sometimes with the Irish MMA fans. And I think,
there's an old classic saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you, kind of a job. And, you need the support of the Irish fans there. It's pivotal. I think it was a kind of it's an understandable move for him to kind of go along the Conor McGregor road, but I think that everyone is burnt out on Conor McGregor
massively.
Right now. And I think that
be yourself, like you need. Yeah. I think he always did a great job of being himself. I've interviewed him for every fight, unfortunately, apart from this one, and he's always done a great job, and interviews with other people as well. And since he got to the UFC, everyone's saying, he's trying to be Conor McGregor. And you know what? They're probably right a little bit. It's been too much. There's been too much of that in a lot of it. And people don't like that, honestly. They really don't.
Absolutely. It'll be very...
Slightly. Is that possible?
Your mic
What'd you say there? No, I think you might be okay now. Want to say that again?
Can I derail this slightly?
Yeah, you sound okay now. Go on.
You said don't take away, or don't remember where your bread is buttered, right? As Irishmen, what is your favorite bread? This is important to me
now. Are you talking about white sliced pan, or are you talking about any type of bread here now?
Favorite bread?
Well, I love McCambridge's brown bread. That's my favorite type of bread, but I'm not
a homemade brown bread.
Loaf
out of the oven is unbelievable. I used to be a white bread man. I'm gone leaning towards multigrain now, but I wouldn't turn down a bit of red. Like a cuisine de France roll with chicken fillets and all that stuff in it. Sean, you know what I'm talking about.
The best. This is the best bread, and you come home on a Friday, right? And you go into the shop, and maybe your mother or your father would have it for you, and it's the loaf, the uncut loaf, and you'd cut it, and to be about fucking that thick, and to be a same amount of thickness of butter, and a slice of fucking ham
on it. Put a bit of
Kerrygold, and a slice of 2 or 3 slices of ham. The other to about that side, ham. Lovely.
Oh, stop.
Oh, you couldn't.
I eat it twice in a month on Sundays as well.
You couldn't.
But anyway, nonetheless, we'll segue on to 2 big loafs in the middleweight division, and that's Uriah Hall versus Andre. Sorry, thanks, guys. Against Andre Munhoz. Spencer, we spoke about him on the Contender. You're very high on Andre Munhoz. The same as ourselves. I'm very high on him too. He's been making big waves in the middleweight division. He comes in here in a kind of a stylistic matchup that really suits him against Uriah Hall, who's probably going to look to stand and bang and will not want to be taken down. And that's what Andre Munhoz is going to want to do. He's going to want to take you down and do some serious damage. Ask Shakari, ask everybody else that he's fought as well. He is a monster, and he is a guy that we all should be looking at on this card.
Yeah, an absolute classic kind of striker versus grappler. You want to do one thing, I want to do something different. And simple as it sounds, it comes down to who's able to determine where this fight takes place. You mentioned, we talked about him on the Contender. He's a guy you guys both think fights for gold. I was the one that came up short, and I still might be, outside of Harry, the biggest Andre Munhoz fan on this podcast. But I just think he runs into Robert Whittaker at some point, because everybody runs into Robert Whittaker at some point in this division, although we'll figure that out down the road. I'm really interested in this fight. I think it is both a great matchup in terms of just sort of gauging where Andre Munhoz is at. I would have loved to have seen him get a bigger opportunity and sort of further ahead, but that's not what really seems to be happening at middleweight at this point. I think Uriah Hall is a good test. I also think it's a fight where we're going to find out a couple of things about Andre Munhoz, because Uriah Hall is experienced. He is still quick. He does still hit hard. He does still have a bunch of tools and a bunch of weapons that, the big question with Uriah is always when he's right, when his mind's in it, when he's focused, when he's able to do those things. Last time out, looked awful against Sean Strickland, broke his orbital in the first round, couldn't see after about 2 minutes in. These things happen in MMA. He has a bad performance. But I tell you what, from talking to him last week, he's ready for this. He's locked in. He's all the right things. Now, certainly you're not going to tell me that, no, man, I'm having a really shitty camp and I don't want to go out there and fight this guy and he's going to blow me out of the water. Nobody's ever going to say that. If they do, it will be earth-shattering for me. It'll be a first in a dozen years. But I think he certainly understands that this is put together for Andre Muniz to sort of get a head off of his name. He was legitimately pissed off when Andre Muniz said, no, I'll stick around and wait for Uriah Hall, when the fight was originally booked in April and Uriah had to pull out. So we're going to see some stuff. We're going to figure out if Andre Muniz is as good as all of us here think he is. Because if he is, he goes out and runs through Uriah Hall and has another first round finish or has another dominant performance. And if he's not, there's some traps here. There's some spots he can get caught here, because Uriah Hall still brings some things to the table that you have to be wary of.
Absolutely, he does. Still got good power, still, strong in the clinch, a very underrated clinch for Uriah Hall. But Harry, it's all about Andre Muniz here and the grappling that he brings to the table. He's just ferocious on the mat. And, you kind of alluded to it speaking about the main event, but if he gets everything right and he gets a clear run up the middleweight ranks, he's going to be a real problem for Isreal Adesanya. As we know, styles make fights, and he has seemingly the perfect style to take on someone like Isreal Adesanya, where he can close the distance and he can put someone on their back. And then when he gets there, he does land damage and he does get submissions. He's a really good grappler and a really good fighter overall in the middleweight division, isn't he?
It's Andre Muniz or it's fucking death, lads. That's it, right? I've said it. To just go back to a point Spencer made, like the Rob Whittaker problem. I mean, Jared Cannonier ran into Rob Whittaker, and here we are, he's in a title shot. So I don't think that's the end of the world, right? I think
they could just avoid him altogether? They could just avoid Whittaker. Give him the Alex Pereira route. Just let's not give him anybody hard, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Or Izzy talked about Whittaker going up to light heavyweight, and I mean, I don't know whether there was legitimacy to that or not, but I mean, I'd be interested in that. I think Whittaker would do all right up there. Maybe he's a little bit small, but I think with Andre Muniz, he is still a fighter that needs to develop a little bit more on the feet, right? You need looks to get in, right? I think the higher that you move up the very shallow middleweight division, you're still going to need, when you get to the very top, to be able to find a way to get inside, right? You're going to need footwork to get inside. You're going to need a little bit more than rudimentary striking to get you on somebody's hips. Even against Adesanya, you don't just want to bulldoze your way in, hoping he makes a mistake on the entry, right? You really want to be moving in a way that forces Adesanya to think about dilemmas, right? Think about, how do I move backwards? How do I move forwards? Against Uriah Hall, I think Spencer hit the nail on the head, right? Who turns up? If Uriah turns up fully in this fight, he's got an air of the Donald Cerrone about him, hasn't he? If he turns up, he's good. If he doesn't turn up, he's a shithouse. And I think if he turns up anywhere, if we're on a spectrum of good to shithouse, if he's anywhere leaning towards shithouse, Andre Muniz is going to catch a kick. He's going to take him down. He's going to finish him really, really quickly. When it hits the mat, there is a level of oscillation between damage and grappling that not many middleweights have and not many middleweights have seen. And we've seen that Muniz is able to transition from what you think are bad spots, i.e. falling off somebody's back, to rolling for arm bars. He's able to snatch up legs for sweeps. He's able to climb up lads if he needs to. There is a level of grappling that we see in MMA, and then there's, especially middleweight MMA, and then there's Andre Muniz. If he can figure a way out, and I think Uriah Hall actually is a great fight, because if Uriah Hall turns up and he's fully locked in, we're going to see whether he has the ability to get close to Uriah Hall. And if he does, well, as Graham says, he's destined for the upper echelons of this division. If he can't, well, then he has to go back to that drawing board, and we're a long way away from talking about Rob Whittaker fights. Because, as Shawnee has said previously, and we talked about this on the last episode, why doesn't jiu-jitsu work at the highest level? It doesn't work because you have to get there,
Indeed. I think we're all hoping for the Tekken version of Uriah Hall to come in here on Saturday night and give Munhoz a good test. What are you hoping to see in this fight, Sean?
Forget about me. 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. The contender, Andre Munhoz, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. Shawnee, Ian, Spencer, Harry. Sorry, you weren't there. But it was a great one.
Leave
7
out
a.m.
me for the fucking grappler. I mean, that's
Yes. It happened. I'm so sorry. But yeah,
If you need to get onto that and how to get to it, see that QR scanner, that barcode in the corner, scan that barcode. It'll send you directly to the SevereMMA Patreon, and you'll be able to listen to that podcast first thing tomorrow morning with me, Spencer, and Sean talking all things Andre Munhoz. Okay, Sean, let's move on to maybe another fight. And I'm going to give you the pick of another fight on the undercard here, stacked with a couple of good ones. I mean, we got Brad Tavares, Dirkus du Plessis, we got Cerrone, Jim Miller, Brad Riddell, Jalen Turner. What are you looking forward to seeing on the prelims?
Do you know what? I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it all, to be honest. They all have a bit of intrigue. Like, I like Jalen Turner. I'm still not sure about him or Brad Riddell. Like, I'm not sure which one. One of them might rise, neither of them might rise. I'm not sure. It's a good proven fight, I think, for both of them. Cerrone, Miller. I think the welterweight division is good for Cerrone. But we said it the last time, taking a fight in short notice. Now, it was a second fucking fight on short notice against probably a better opponent than Jim Miller. I think it's going to be tough for Cerrone. I love Brad Tavares versus Dricus du Plessis. Brad has been that test for guys for a long, long time. And he's that test for Dricus du Plessis here on Saturday night. I think he's a very good fighter. Not 100% sold on him yet. Macy Barber coming back here against, here we go, Evil, here we go. And then Jessica Rose Clark against Ireland's own Julia Stoliarenko, training with Andrew McGahan, so she'll probably get submitted, let's be honest.
Hey, Harry, you're busting at the seams. You are busting at the seams to speak about Jalen Turner, a guy who has been performing quite excellently in the lightweight division. He's coming in here against a tough customer in Brad Riddell, who is, has been in training camp with Volkanovski and Isreal Adesanya. So, he's going to be fully prepped and ready to go. What are you expecting to see in that fight?
I expect range. Oh, mic check.
Keep going, we'll give you go on.
So I expect to see range being a big factor here. A big factor, right? Brad Riddell is a pretty good kickboxer, and we've seen that in MMA, right? No bad sound.
You're
not
gone.
great.
You'll have to go, Harry. You'll have to go.
We might. I'll go over to you, Spencer, real quick, and just if we could talk about Brad Riddell and Jalen Turner.
Radio, real quick there.
Yeah, indeed. Jalen Turner has come in and, 4 finishes in his last 4 fights even.
12 for 12 for his career.
Yeah, man. And he is someone that we really should be looking at. But it's a tough test with someone here like Brad Riddell. And Harry will bring you back in after Spencer.
Well, I'll leave Jalen Turner for Harry because he's certainly, Jalen Turner or we riot. Riddell's a good test. Shawnee said he's not really quite sure where either of these guys go, whether they go up or down. I think Brad Riddell is exactly where Brad Riddell is going to be for the next little while. He maybe moves up a notch or two, maybe falls back a notch or two, right? He went into that Rafael Fiziev fight, ranked in the top 15, coming off the good win over Drew Dober. He's just a polished, professional, quality lightweight. He is one of those guys that makes the division go forward. He's a perfect tough test for a guy like Jalen Turner that we still have questions about. Harry's going to get into it being about range. I think that's going to be the deciding factor for sure. But Brad Riddell's a guy that is just like, he's just a quality hand, man. Like, he is a guy that you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to be in there. He's a tough bastard. He's not going away easy. He's going to wrestle. He gets better as the fight goes on. He starts a little bit slow sometimes, but he gets better as the fight goes on. He's got the cardio to push a good pace and to get inside and make you work. And so this is one where we're going to find out whatever questions we still have about Jalen Turner, who, as I said, 12 for 12 in terms of finishes. To me, this is, has he learned from that Matt Frivola fight where he fought a guy that was scrappy and wanted to wrestle? Harry, take it away on the length.
Yeah, I mean, I bring you in, Harry, for Jalen Turner. He's a guy that, you know, I kind of keep at arm's length because little bit I get a little bit personal, afraid of my life of spiders, can't handle them at all. His nickname is the tarantula. He has like fucking 50 pet tarantulas.
So does he. That's why he has them.
Yeah, I'm like, no way. I don't want anything to do with it.
You
so
just got to get yourself some tarantulas.
No,
you'll be fine,
man. I couldn't do it. My God, I couldn't even be in the same house as one. It's like no bueno for me. And for that reason, I keep Jalen Turner at arm's length unless you can't bring a tarantula inside the octagon with him. And that's a good thing because I can watch him fight.
The octagon?
I didn't say octagon.
You fucking did.
You 100% did.
It's 8 cocks coming at you.
I'm talking too much animals here. Harry, talk about Jalen Turner.
Mic check. Mic check. Wonderful. Yeah, Jalen Turner for me is a guy that has a really large trajectory. We've seen, UFC debut, insanely tough fight for your first out, right? You don't go in and just like, oh, here's Vicente Luque. Like, okay, sure, I guess, right? The Matt Frivola fight, we learned some things, right? We answered some questions. We learned that in the octagon, if he brings a spider, things go badly, right? But is that not the most MMA thing ever, by the way? Oh, I'm petrified by spiders, so I buy 50 of them. That's the most MMA thing ever, right? But in terms of his actual fighting ability, he's a guy that's really starting to learn who he is, right? And feel who he is. In the Uros Medic and Jamie Mullarkey fights, both of those guys are pretty good fighters, right? Jamie Mullarkey is a guy that's probably going to stay where he is. Uros Medic, I think people expected him to be way shooting up the division. And fuck me, that was a blowout, right? Absolute blowout. Jalen Turner has one thing that really impresses me. Now, the range is something I think that he will add to his game eventually. He's going to learn to fight at his own range. But the thing that impresses me is his killer instinct and his ability to find finishes, right? He doesn't waste shots. He's not wasteful. He doesn't throw shots to just throw them. He doesn't throw shots in the anticipation of them landing. He finds shots and he throws them. And when he has his man half hurt, he has such a brilliant ability to swarm, but not swarming recklessly. He gets into a position where he can find finishes in the octagon with both shots, or if it's Uros Medic, he's going to look for a neck. And that's something I like too, is he's going to take what is there. He is confident enough in his transitional ability to take what is available to him rather than being like, I must pound this guy out, or I have to finish him from this choke or that choke or the next thing. He will take what's available. And I think that against Brad Riddell is something that I'm really impressed with. Now, what we saw in Riddell's countering ability is he can anti-grapple and scramble really, really, really well. But I do think that if in between, how long ago was the other fight? Jesus, it's been a while since his, 4 months or something. If in the last 4 months between the Jamie Mullarkey fight and now, he's been able to add a little bit more of an understanding about his own range. That's my voice, not my mic. That's me talking for fucking 2 hours. If he can add a little bit more of an understanding to his own range, I think it's going to be hard for Riddell to get close. And I do think he hurts him on the feet. And when he hurts him on the feet, I think he probably snatches a neck in the octagon with his spiders.
We are trademarking the octagon. It sounds like something you'd see on, I don't know, fucking the Blue Movie or something like that. The octagon.
It's 100% a bad UFC porn parody.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Before we round it up, Spencer, I know we've talked about pretty much all the fights. There's a couple left on the prelims. Is there anything that you'd like to highlight before we finish up today?
I just want to see more from Macy Barber, right? I think there was a ton of hype. She brought a bunch of it on herself with the whole, one of two fighters on this card nicknamed The Future. Went out with the whole going to beat John Jones's record and had the countdown clock and all of those, just terrible decisions and bad things. Terrible decisions. Somebody, the countdown clock. Absolutely. Somebody needed to tell her not to do that. She then got hustled up the ladder a little bit quicker, ran into Roxanne Modafferi and was getting pieced up by Roxanne Modafferi before she blew out her knee, then blows out her knee in that fight, loses that fight. shows some grittiness sticking around, comes back, gets pieced up by Alexa Grasso, and now we're sort of at the reset point. The thing I wrote today for 10 things about her was, and not 10 things about her, but 10 things that I like about this fight. I don't have 10 things that I like about Maycee Barber, is that she's still 24. Like, she's still just a kid. She's still just figuring it out. She's finally settled in at Team Alpha Male. She's staying at one gym. I think they're a good gym in terms of getting people to maximize whatever talent they have. Doesn't necessarily mean you're all going all the way forward. You know, some people are Chad Mendez, some people are Andre Fili, some people are, you know, guys that you haven't seen that much of lately, like
Song Yadong.
I mean, Song Yadong looks great.
Song Yadong would be great in the octagon.
Brilliant.
And we've gone sideways. But this is a fight where Maycee Barber, like, if Maycee Barber is going to be something, it's very similar to the Ian Garry fight. If she really is going to be something, this is a fight that she should win, because Jessica Eye is experienced, but is on the way down. She's kind of just somebody that's going to go in there and look to throw her hands a little bit. She's going to look to wrestle a little bit. And Maycee Barber could probably, if she is as good as I think she can be, she can go out there and just out tough Jessica Eye. Just go out there and be nasty and be grimy like she was against Montana De La Rosa. The fights that she lost, she was out there trying to be a striker. She's not a striker. You're not somebody that, she's not a great athlete, actually. She's not very fluid, but she's tough as shit, and she'll hit you really hard, and she'll get in close and mash elbows into your face. Go out and do that to Jessica Eye, and you're picking up a win over a former title challenger, over a perennial top 15 fighter, and then you're actually starting to take positive steps. So that's what I want to see.
Isn't it amazing how quickly people become forgettable in the UFC? Like, Maycee Barber would have been like getting the hype, maybe like an Ian Garry is getting coming into this card a while back. She picks up a couple of losses, you know, to Alexa Grasso, a very good fighter, and Roxy, you know, that durable test.
She was being touted as, you know, a potential to be the youngest UFC champion ever at some stage.
Everybody screams about wanting to find new superstars in the UFC. Excuse me, I've got the hairy problem. The UFC doesn't promote these fighters enough, but they're very, very quick to jump off the bandwagon and say fuck you to people like Maycee Barber the minute there's struggles, right? As soon as they get a push and something goes sideways, all of it is just a vehicle for shitting on the UFC and taking shots at the UFC. Because if they actually wanted to see superstars and see people develop, they'd still be interested in Maycee Barber, but they're not, because she had a little bit of struggle, and nobody wants to stick around and ride out the rough patches. Even though we've got so many, you know, great fighters that are at this point that have gone through so many struggles. Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, 500 fighter until he's rattled off all of these wins. But yeah, just get off the bandwagon early.
Great experience for her, you know, and great experience, all of those, how they got to the top.
I think your sound is gone again, Harry.
Wrap it up, Ian. Wrap it up quick.
All right. That's it. That's it. We've gone nearly 2 hours, our longest show ever, but it was worth it for the card that is happening on Saturday night. Isreal Adesanya, Jared Cannonier, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and a bunch of other fight cards to look fights to look forward to. And we can all look forward to getting ourselves some all real nutrition bars as well. Head on over there to eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA, get yourself 15% off. That's eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA, get you some. We've done it, guys. We've talked about it. Now all we have to do is wait for the fights ourselves. We've thrown in some sexual innuendo, we've thrown in some opinions, we've thrown in everything to this preview show. All it is to be said now is come on, the Cats. Let's get the job done against Clare this weekend. Limerick versus Galway. It's going to be probably a cakewalk for Limerick to get into the final. Probably the easiest route they've ever had to get into the final, but they might not have it all their own way if we can get past Clare this weekend. Let's make it happen.
There a few weeks ago.
Stop. Not at all. Not at all. Didn't beat us when it counted. That's all that matters. My name is Ian O'Neill. You can follow me at IO'Neill MMA. Check out the Owl Triangle. Check out Spencer Kite and Keyboard Kimura on UFC.com. Check out his stuff this week. It's been phenomenal stuff. Check out the one-man boot for Harry Powell. He has done a fantastic job in breaking down Isreal Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. Sean Sheen has done the damn thing on Sherdog.com this year. And join us all. Every single one of us here will be back on Patreon, up there in the top corner. Scan that barcode, sign up to the SevereMMA Patreon, some quality content over there. We will be back next week for the Battle of the Raphaels. Enjoy the card this Saturday night. Good luck.
Limerick.
Go on.